In this video, we're going to look at certain tri-state areas that exist across the U.S. and determining which ones border each other and which ones don't. So in the Northeast, you do have this tri-state area between New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And obviously, they all come together at this point right here, which is actually really close to where I-84 crosses from Pennsylvania to New York, and you can see it in New Jersey Route 23 is just so close. It's at Carpenter's Point, New Jersey. On the Pennsylvania side, it's Mattawamis, Pennsylvania, and it's Port Jervis, New York. And this is where, again, all three sides come together. It's right by I-84. A lot of roads missed the New Jersey site altogether, but it is in the northwestern corner of New Jersey, and that's about that. The New York City tri-state area, though, the one centered around New York City, involves two states that, and this is the one when I hear tri-state area, this is what I always hear about. It does not involve them touching, because look at what New York City is. Obviously, New Jersey and Connecticut are the closest states. Even if you look at the New York metropolitan area, it does actually involve Pike County, Pennsylvania, which again is the part of Pennsylvania that involves the Pennsylvania part. But for most purposes, people coming into New York City from out of state or from either New Jersey or Connecticut. But look, these two states do not touch each other, because New Jersey and Connecticut sort of go in on each other, but then they don't, and are separated by all of Westchester. Furthermore, it's not even that close, because the furthest north a bridge gets between the two sides is the GW Bridge. Past that, you're in New Jersey, you have to go all the way up to the Tappan Zee Bridge. And then there's not even great road access across Westchester that then gets you conveniently into Connecticut. I mean, sure, there's some access, but there's not like great access between the two sides. And again, these are two states that don't touch each other, but because they're centered around New York City, that's mainly why you have a tri-state area here, even though they don't touch. Usually tri-state areas touch. Then in the Philadelphia tri-state area, which includes Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. This does exclude Maryland. Now, oftentimes when you think of the Philadelphia tri-state area, you do include significant portions of northeastern Maryland, as well as significant chunks of Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. However, for these purposes, you do exclude Maryland. And I guess you could think of it that there's a tri-state area between two states that don't touch, between Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey, because of how close they are and how central they are to Wilmington. But Wilmington isn't really like an anchor city that would really do that, even though, again, this could be considered to be a tri-state area. Again, they don't touch, much like New Jersey to Connecticut. They're about 20 miles apart. Here, you have to cut across 95 onto 295 to get between the two sides. Now these three states do touch the middle of the Delaware River. You have Claymont, Delaware here, and you have Marcus Hook, Pennsylvania here. It's actually not unclear what township really is on the New Jersey side of it. Maybe Logan Township, and obviously you can't get directly over it. So this bridge on US 322, probably the closest you're gonna get. And these are the closest cities that I would say are tied to Philadelphia. Then near the Pittsburgh tri-state area, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. All three states do have a tri-point. Right here by East Liverpool, Ohio, Lawrenceville, West Virginia, and Georgetown, Pennsylvania. Or maybe Glasgow, because of the Ohio River cutting through the area. And again, they are close to Pittsburgh. Now, obviously, if you go Pittsburgh, then they don't all touch, because you have to cut through West Virginia in order to get anywhere along US 22, or if you're going further south, I-70 between the two sides. But generally, the Pittsburgh tri-state area does include areas from all three states. And there is a CSA as well, but it's the same states as well. Like, you don't add Maryland or any of that stuff. Then you have the Erie tri-state area. So the metro area is just in Pennsylvania, because Erie is a small city. But look at what Erie is. It's in between New York and Ohio. And these two states don't touch. You have to go around 45 miles through Pennsylvania to get from New York to Ohio. They don't touch. But again, with how many people can flow into Erie from either side, it does sort of make sense as to why a tri-state area, because you'd have people from like multiple different states coming into Erie. Then you have the Minsk Valley, but again, that's the same as the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania one. New York, Vermont, and Massachusetts, many say, can form a tri-state area, mainly centered around Albany, which, again, sometimes, you know, look at the NWS office in Albany, it does actually extend into northwestern Connecticut, but for these purposes, we're just looking at the state that's closest to, which is Albany, Vermont, and Massachusetts. They do touch, I think, in the Capital District on the New York side, but there isn't really a whole lot of anything around the Tri-Point area. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, which makes sense because Vermont, a lot of it is the middle of nowhere. Then you have Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. This forms Upper New England. Again, Vermont and Maine don't touch. You have to cross through New Hampshire, and a pretty significant portion of New Hampshire, if I'm being honest. You probably have to go like over 60 miles to get from one side to the other, because as New Hampshire narrows, there isn't really a great road. US 2 in New Hampshire might be the best option for traversing the state, and even then, it's still 35 miles, so close, but they don't touch. But they do form Upper New England, even if they're not anchored by anything, which is a region of the U.S. Then you have the Berkshires, which a region is generally only considered to include western Massachusetts and northwestern Connecticut. However, when you include the Taconic Mountains of New York, sometimes you have this tri-state area between New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. It's near Boston Corner, New York, which is actually ironic. Then you have Bear Mountain, Connecticut, and Orlando, Massachusetts. And this is where the Tri-Point sort of lies. And this is just the Northeast. Obviously, the Chicagoland, which includes Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Sometimes when you have the Chicago metro area, some broad definitions do include Michigan, but most of them don't. And again, it gets close, but not quite there. So when you shift focus and you head to this region, again, not only are Indiana and Wisconsin not touching, they're not really that close. They're about 60 miles apart. However, when you center around a city as big as Chicago, even a place like Kenosha, which is an hour away, will still attract people into the city for work opportunities. And obviously, people from Gary might also go into Chicago. So you have multiple states flowing into Chicago. You do have the Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky tri-state area, which is further south and right here along the Ohio River, but again, sort of nothing around it. Cincinnati is a tri-state area because obviously look at where Cincinnati is. It's right on the border with Kentucky, and Indiana is close enough that the Cincinnati Beltway actually extends into Indiana for a mile. So the Tri-Point, it does lie in the Ohio River. Nonetheless, though, like, people from all these states could flow into Cincinnati. Then you have the Dubuque tri-state area. So you have the Quad Cities of oh wait, no, this isn't the Quad Cities. They actually touch right at Dubuque in Iowa. You have East Dubuque in Illinois, and then Fairplay, Wisconsin. So this forms a bit of a tri-state area. Then you have the Sioux City metropolitan area. Generally only thought of to be in Iowa and South Dakota, but some broad definitions do include Nebraska in it, and it's in Sioux Falls. Sioux Falls is much further north. It's Sioux City right here, and as you can see, it's sort of Sioux City's in Iowa, but it does lie really close to Dakota Dunes in South Dakota and South Sioux City in Nebraska. So that's why you have that. You have the La Crosse tri-state area, which is Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. They touch. They're like, well, the three states touch right here. La Crosse is up here, so it has to be a somewhat big city when you realize, like, how far they are. It's like Victory, Wisconsin, New Albin, Iowa, Jefferson, Minnesota. That's where the Tri-Point is, and it's in the Mississippi River. Then you have the Tri-State District, which is where they used to mine certain metals in southwest Missouri, southeast Kansas, and northeast Oklahoma. So it's actually not that far off from Joplin. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere, but at least you can actually access the marker on land, even if there's no roads into the marker. And then you have the South United States, and then obviously the West. So South, you have the DMV, which includes Washington as well as surrounding parts of Maryland and Virginia. Sometimes they say that it's a tri-state area, but D.C. isn't really a state. However, you then realize that parts of West Virginia are close enough to D.C. in the eastern part of the state, like Harper's Ferry, that would make it a true tri-state area if you include Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia, which can still sometimes be considered in the greater influence of D.C. Then you have the Delmarva area. Everyone calls it the Delmarva Peninsula, even though I think it's more like the Virginia Beach Peninsula, even though it's not there. Delaware and Virginia don't touch, and you have to get on US 13 in Maryland to get between the two of them. People always think that Delaware is just a tiny portion in the north, and they don't realize how far south Delaware, really New Jersey, even stretch. Cape May, New Jersey is further south than 2/3 of Delaware, to be fair. But Cape May, New Jersey is around the same latitude as D.C. Even Atlantic City is south of the part of Delaware that everyone thinks is Delaware, but they don't realize that Bethany Beach and Lewis are still in Delaware and how far they are. And when you realize that, you realize that Delaware stretches much further to the south of D.C. and sort of into the heart of Virginia in a way. It's so far south that it would even extend into Kentucky. People don't realize how far south Delaware goes. Nonetheless, it doesn't reach Virginia because this part of Maryland also, if you notice how the border is a lot further south than areas in the rest of the state. And you still have to travel over 40 miles to get between Delaware and Virginia. But it's on the same peninsula, hence why many think that it is a tri-state area. Then you have Greater Memphis, which extends into 3 cities, Mississippi and Arkansas, as well as Memphis, Tennessee. And when you realize where Memphis is, it's very obvious to see why, because Memphis lies right on the border of 3 states, essentially. You have Memphis, and then you have South Haven, Mississippi, and West Memphis, Arkansas. And the true Tri-Point lies out here, but it's very clear to see why Memphis is a tri-state area in multiple cities because of how close it is. Fun fact: the Memphis area, I believe, was the area that was gerrymandered to make Tennessee more favorable for the Republicans. See, initially it was 7-2, and then it became 8-1. And oh wait, they actually gerrymandered Nashville, not Memphis. Okay, I was wrong then. Then you have the Wiregrass region. It's in this area that's one of the most areas prone to hitting hurricanes, and it's where Alabama, Georgia, and Florida all meet up. So the true try point is at Lucy, Alabama, Steam Mill, Georgia, and I can't tell where it is on the Florida side of it. Maybe Malone. And that's where the Florida tri-point with Alabama and Georgia lies. The only two states that Florida actually borders. You have Arklatex, which is a socioeconomic region in Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana. It's actually anchored by Texarkana, which is in both Texas and Arkansas. And the tri-point of Louisiana is further to the south, and it's right here. You do have the Southern Appalachian tri-state area with South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, where they converge right here. It's actually close to Clemson University as well. And there's multiple wildfires in the area. Then is the West. The Inland Northwest, which historically is known as the Inland Empire, and also Cascadia, is Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Sometimes they'll include Montana, but sometimes they won't. And again, these three states do obviously touch. It touches kind of in the middle of nowhere, relatively speaking, because people don't live in Eastern Washington or Eastern Oregon or Idaho in general. And then you have the tri-state area that around Arizona, Nevada, and California that lies right here. So you have Laughlin, Fort Mojave, and then I guess Ibis in California. It is somewhat centered around Las Vegas, but Las Vegas is also much further to the north in these areas. Obviously, you have the four-state area that's known as where Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma get close. So you have that four-state area that lies right here. Then you have the four corners where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico all touch. And they do all touch, and it's right out in here. And you do have this giant list of tri-points in the U.S. There's 24 on water and 36 on land. You do have a marker for the three-country can where Norway, Sweden, and Finland all meet, but that's obviously in Europe. But there are a few tri-state areas that this list didn't mention that I think are still tri-state areas and do deserve some degree of mention. First of all, I feel like Mobile, you get traffic from both Mississippi and Florida. Even though they don't touch, I feel like this really should be a Gulf Coast tri-state area that consists of Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And when you realize how short I-10 is in Alabama, you'll realize just, you know, how short it is. It's only runs 66 miles in the state. You could make the argument for Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, but that at least is runs 77 miles throughout the state. It's a straight shot, and unlike Mobile, there's not really a city anchoring it down. So it's not really like you'd have much traffic from Alabama or Louisiana flowing into a place like Biloxi, Mississippi. I also feel like Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska do somewhat center around Cheyenne. I get that Nebraska is kind of far away, and that the Tri-Point is literally in the middle of nowhere. And by literally in the middle of nowhere, and I've been there, I mean like literally in the middle of nowhere. But still. I also feel like maybe Sioux Falls connecting with Iowa and Minnesota is a tri-state area. They meet up at Benclair, South Dakota, Bruce, Minnesota, and Larchwood, Iowa, and that does strike to me as a probable tri-state area. And up here, you might think that Spokane could have a tri-state area with how close it is not just to Idaho, but also into Montana. Now, when you look up the Spokane metro area, it will just be Washington and Idaho. Even when you have the Coeur d'Alene CSA mixed in, you'll still have just Washington and Idaho. But I feel like it's not that far away from Montana to have that. And I-90 in Idaho does run for only 74 miles, so it's something just to keep in mind.